The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised.
Listen in as your host, Casey Colburn, brings together a perfectly picked panel of guests to discuss hot topics and events within the metaphysical and paranormal field. But don't worry, should the discussions get too heated, our studio's witch will sound her cackle to simmer the cauldron back down. Listen for new episodes of Cauldron Talk with Casey Colburn every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. only on Paranormal Buzz Radio. Welcome to Cauldron Talk. This is Season 2, Episode 3. Today we were talking about shamans and other medicines. I'm your host, Casey Colburn, and today we welcome to our circle Coyote Chris Sutton, Utu, Witchdoctor, and Chad Tibbitts. Welcome to my show, guys. How are we all doing today?
Great.
Good.
Wonderful here.
All right. Before we begin, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name's Coyote Chris Sutton. I've been practicing shamanism for 26 years. Got training initially in the Lakota tradition. Now I follow the Pacific Northwest Coast tradition of Sasiwas medicine, and I've been doing that for about 20 years. And so I do healing work, psychic work, all the the good shaman work and things like that, and I also do paranormal work as well.
Hi, my name is Utu. I do not identify as a shaman. I am initiated in a line from Mozambique as a witch doctor. And so that type of work is a little different. But, I'm part of the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple out of Priestess Miriam's work. I live here at the Niagara Voodoo Shrine in St. Catharines, Ontario. So a great deal of my work is all about the spirits of the Underground Railroad, the type of conjurations and root work that goes along with that magic of uplifting and breaking bonds and breaking people free and elevating spirits that don't normally get their attention that they probably deserve amongst the world of people that work amongst the conjurers. So, and I'm also the founder of the Dragon Ritual Drummers. So I spend most of my time traveling the continent in Canada and the United States, predominantly neo-pagan festivals, conferences, and hoodoo and conjure conferences as well. And that's what my work's all about.
And my name is Chad Tibbitts, and I'm the owner of Tree of Life Studio in Jamestown, New York, and the founder of Origins Forest Temple. I have a Scandinavian background, so I am a Sami Noidi, and that is the equivalent of a Scandinavian shaman. I work with Amanita, I work with cacao and other plant teachers, and I help people heal, grow, and expand their awareness. And I guess my training started when I was young. My grandfather started showing me the old ways, and it just kind of grew with it. And I started practicing officially in 2002.
Very cool. I'm honored to talk to all three of you. So my questions for you today are, shamanism appears in many belief systems around the world. What is shamanism and what does it mean for you?
Oh, that's always my favorite question because there's so many ways to describe it. For me, shamanism is my relationship with the spirits, my medicine practice, and just trying to become a better person. I mean, you never stop learning, you never stop growing, and that's what's beautiful about shamanism and working with the elements of the land and Mother Earth and the Father Sky. Is you're constantly learning, and they're constantly showing you ways of helping people and becoming a better person. And to me, it's about service. It's about helping people become the best they can be, whether it be through healing, psychic work, whatever, or just, sitting down talking to somebody. It's helping other people find their medicine, to find their spiritual path. And that is my biggest focus, I would say, is that to help people become what they really need to do, be it through all sorts of different methodologies. But that's it at heart. It's just to help people using my medicine work.
Well, as the non-shaman in the group, for me, the word, especially in the communities I belong to, it's usually a loaded word. Most of the events that I go to in the continent, sort of refute the term, to be honest, at least amongst certain people, unless they're ethnic. So it's interesting to hear the other guests here. It's really awesome. For me, I've always thought about it as where the word comes from, right? It's literally a Eastern Siberian, Mongolian parts of China word that denotes that particular tribal practice of somebody who takes in, ingests certain things, goes through certain rudiments to enter into the spirit world to provide healing. And so the only people that I've ever personally met that also identified as shaman that were indigenous are people from in Incan shaman that come up from Ecuador and Peru. I've worked a lot with them, attended a few things that they've been at. We've been co-presenters, and so that was always the work, and that to me represented shamanism. It was different. They were approaching it from a much different modus operandi than I approach my work for. My work is definitely removing things from people, negative energies if they want to, or helping them heal to some degree. But I don't go through that. I clearly do not go through the same steps that most people that identify as shaman do, which is it's just different from my line of work. But I certainly see some similarities to some degree. But I tend not to ingest certain things when I'm doing my work, so therefore it sort of separates me. I mean, I do that on my personal pursuits or my own personal spiritual journeys, but for my specific work, the way I honor the lineages that I've been initiated under, we are next to never intoxicated or under any influence of anything, even if it's plant medicine or sacred plants that have the ability to help us expand our consciousness. It's just not something that we normally do, but I absolutely do not look down upon it at all. It fascinates me and it's interesting to me. So for me, shamanism is really something that I look at as an observer almost every time, because it's not something I identify as. I live right amongst a very large enclave of First Nations here in Ontario, the big reservation nearby. And so it's interesting that some of the people there that I work with also identify as shaman, whether they're men or women. And even if they're not involved in their traditional longhouse religion, they'll still be immersed in something, honestly, everything from Reiki to elements of conjure and traditional witchcraft that they implement in their work. So, I honestly have always kind of just sort of stayed away from the terminology, because I don't see, unless there's somebody from some ethnic part of the world, I normally don't ever see anybody that's calling themselves a shaman. So I don't really identify it in my own personal work, but it's definitely an interesting and wonderful practice. I know that much.
Yeah, and I agree a lot with what he just said too. I don't think I've ever really called myself a shaman. I think other people have called me that. I refer to myself as a traditional healer or a noity, and it's kind of a generalized term, I think, but going back to it, the way I see, I guess, shamanism, it is like the beginning of human spirituality. It is like the beginning of, I guess, human religion, if you want to call it that. They made sense of the world. They were the ones in the communities that you look to for healing and advice, and they were the ones with the connection to the earth and ultimately the universe. They were the ones that opened the doors, that took you into the unknown and helped you heal. They showed you the energy and showed you how things were connected. They made sense of everything. And yeah, I guess that's how you'd see it. They broke down the barriers between what was known and what was unknown. And yeah, I agree though. I really, the term shaman, it's kind of almost becoming, I wouldn't say generic, but I think that I don't know how you can just kind of go about and have that term out there kind of loosely. And I don't think it's the people doing the work that are really calling them that. I think it's everybody that kind of looks into like people that practice the unknown that might be a little out of their comfort zone, and they get labeled, a shaman because that's the first word that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate in some way that, I'm going to just take a wild guess from listening to my colleagues on the show that, rooted, lineage is intact, and so respect for traditions is obviously there. And it's unfortunate. I think that there's some other outlying communities where the term was definitely appropriated. It's been used terribly. And therefore in this current culture in the last 10 or so more years, it's become literally almost taboo. But again, it's just interesting to me that since the word does have roots far off in the East, that, Incan shaman, this is a terminology. These are people that come up to the area I live in and teach and share their traditions and their religions, and that's what they identify as. So I'm not going to tell them that it's incorrect, and I'm always fascinated to work with them. So I know plenty of people, even as our one colleague here who's Lakota, works in the Lakota tradition. I've met a couple of them that identify specifically as a shaman. And so that, I never have an issue with that at all. I never question that, ever, so. I
was always taught to be very humble about the word, and so I don't generally call myself that. I say, and I think, God knows, I hope I've been saying it, this whole time, is I'm a shamanic practitioner. I practice shamanism. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about ingesting things. I've never ingested anything. The traditions I have been taught in don't do that. What they say, you get there through drumming, through, doing ritual and things like that to get to that spot that you're talking about where you meet with the spirits in the spirit world and that sort of thing. But yeah, everybody kind of, I agree about the word shaman gets thrown around a lot. And a lot of people have ripped people off using that word, saying that they're that. And then they charge $400 for a sweat lodge. It packs 100 and something people in there, that kind of crap. And, right. Yeah, you see all that kind of stuff. And I hate seeing it. This is the path that was laid out in front of me, and I never asked for it. It didn't happen until I was 35 years old, and it was given to me, it's presented to me, and so I said, and I tried to find it, and that didn't work. So I said, oh well, what the hell, and here I am. And so, but I agree with both of you what you're saying there about the word. It's getting kind of watered down over the years because people have used it the wrong way.
It certainly has made things a little bit more complicated for me when I'm trying to describe what my own practices are, because I look at it as much more of an eclectic, like Wiccan practice, with some native tradition put in there because that's my roots. And ultimately that's what Spirit tells me to use, so that's what I use. But it does make it kind of difficult because people will tell me, oh, you're a shaman. And I'll say, no, because I'm honestly not even really sure what that term means, but I'm not really sure what the difference is either. So it definitely is becoming very blurred. And hopefully through this episode, we'll be able to kind of show that, one, there's many different ways to practicing a shamanic practice. And two, that just because something looks like shamanism doesn't mean that it is.
Well, we're all definitely tiptoeing around the subject in a great way, and that makes me happy. But yes, I wasn't inferring earlier about this specifically about, taking something to alter the state, but like you said, it's about altered states, and that can come through ritual, drumming, chanting, absolutely. And I think if I was to define it, like I said earlier, again, it doesn't really fall under something. When there's ceremonies happening that I'm attending where altered states through ritual is happening, I'm usually the principal drummer, and the drummers in voodoo ceremonies tend to absolutely try not to be possessed or be visited by spirits. They're holding down the foundation.
Right.
So the priestess or the priest sometimes can incur that visit, or it happens for other people. So, there's no doubt about it when we think of the word shaman, and in Casey, again, because of your indigenous roots, there are plenty of, it denotes a type of magic. It denotes a type of medicine of someone who's in the altered state, goes to the spirit world, use of various animal curios, animal spirits, and then brings back the medicine to help heal that person. And so if that's the work someone's doing, then again, if people in South America and people in North America and, for that matter, people in the Philippines who are various different, indigenous peoples identify with the word because the word encompasses many things, then there's no problem with it. It is what it is.
Absolutely.
Very true. Yeah.
I think that was very perfectly said. So how does one become a shaman or work in the practices that you work in?
Wow. I can only speak for myself. I mean, my story is, and I'll tell it in a nutshell because it's usually years and years of progress. But my wife took me to a powwow when I was, like I said, I was 35 years old, and I wandered into a barn where they're doing a warrior's dance called gourd dance, and I had what the Buddhists call, I think, a satori, where their spiritual lightning bolt hit me. And I realized that I was standing in two separate worlds, the world of earth and, the normal, what you call normal, and the world of spirit. And I had to figure it out. It became an obsession. I had to figure this out. And Spirit opened these doors for me. I kept meeting teachers and learning new things. And so it was almost like the path had been laid out in front of me. And sometimes I went kicking and screaming. But it was the right thing to do. And that's what happened to me. I know some people are picked by lineage. In a lot of the Lakota traditions, it's a family. It's passed down to family members. And it's the same in other tribes, I believe, as well. They're nations. And so it just, and sometimes it just is, and you're picked out, and somebody picks you and say you got the medicine, I'm going to start training you. So like I said, I can only speak for myself, and that's what happened to me, but I have heard of those other ways as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I was born in Scotland, so I was raised by superstitious people. Everyone in Scotland's superstitious, let's be real. But growing up in Canada, in my 20s is when I literally stumbled into witchcraft. I stumbled into a coven of a couple of priestesses in the region I was living here in St. Catharines that were originally from the United States. And that was the first time I'd ever met anybody that was truly like immersed in disciplined magic. And so for me, it was that I think the thing that's recommended, I think, is if you study with somebody or you're in at least a paradigm that allows you to heal yourself first. And in this modern era, I almost feel bad for the traditional witchcraft that, kind of helped really spawn the neo-pagan scene, because not that long ago, it was a very dignified practice. Even if it was a terrible coven, when people exited out of it after a couple of years, you still spent 2 years of really honing down your own personal ability for sorcery with a new moon, a full moon gathering, a class in between, and you learned about yourself, and you learned to sort of discipline yourself a little bit. And as I transferred over into other traditions, again, just because of the drum just kept pushing me into places where my service was accepted or encouraged. It just became more about learning to be humble and learning to be disciplined in yourself. I akin it to like a martial art almost. Like you want to learn to be able to, hone these energies because they can be overwhelming. Anytime you see these people that we know, I'm sure we all know them, that, go into the spirit world and talk to angels and various things and come back out. It almost makes a mockery of the dignified practices that I think all of us in some way is clinging to something that's traditional and helping keep it preserved. And so we have to take a sense of responsibility. And so, for me, again, as a witch doctor, that's not exactly a term that's celebrated amongst too many places, but it's accurate. Again, it's a term that's accurate because the people that I was adopted by, essentially, in that particular family, that is the term that everybody in majority parts of the entire continent of Africa identify as that word, and they do it very proudly to remove witchcraft, to remove negative energy. It just so happens to be a term that was applied as well in American rootwork and conjure. So when the title was given, as opposed to just keeping it quiet, I just embraced it. But discipline is the main thing, I think, if people want to get into the practices. It's definitely going to be a lifetime. Like, nope, I'm not done learning, and it's going to be a lifelong journey. So you try to have respect. You have respect, learn discipline, and of course, I think we all know that the ego is the one thing. What's the worst thing we see is people abuse their spiritual position through ego and take advantage of it, and that's where you're starting to dwindle into the dangerous zone.
Definitely.
Yeah, and absolutely. that is probably one of the hardest questions when people ask, like, how do I do this? How do I get going? It's so hard because there wasn't a book, there wasn't anything really set out that says this is the manual, and when you get done, you get the certificate that says you're ready to go, I mean, I started walking around the woods with my grandfather when I was young, and he showed me the different plants. He showed me what they were for. We'd go collect some of these plants to give to some of the neighbors and some of the family, and he told me how they worked. And I didn't think much about it when I was little, and I guess it was kind of just a progress, when I was in, I think probably third grade, when we got to go to the library and pick out books, I was always pulling the books that were like the ghosts and, all the creepy ghost books because I wanted to know what else was out there. We went to church and it wasn't like the answer. Like it seemed like there always needed to be something more. Like I needed to know what was going on. And when I was 15, I met a girl, which is now my wife, and they asked me if I wanted to go to church. So that Sunday I went to church with them, and it was in Lilydale. And the whole family is spiritual healers. So that was quite a surprise to me because there was finally a name given to some of the things that I had already learned. And it really didn't have a name up to that point. And then from there over the years, I went to massage school and, still continued reading through different major religions, doing all the research I could on everything, just because I wanted to know answers. And when I was in massage school, part of massage school was Reiki, just learning Reiki. And it was really quick. It was just super quick, 1 day thing to cover energy healing, and that was it. Well, now there was a new term given to it. So then I had to go become a master, like a couple different times, and it still wasn't the answer. And then I had a traumatic experience in my life. And I literally found myself in the woods for 4 months by myself. And something happened at that point. And I didn't try to become enlightened. It's almost like you give up and you say, you know what? There's something else. I think I'm fighting for all the wrong reasons on a lot of things. And I'm just going to devote myself to helping people. And that's when things really started opening up. And I don't know if you can teach things like that in a book. I don't know if you can take somebody under your wing and, you can show them things, but you can't put an experience like that into somebody's life that makes something like this happen. And people can get trained and they can do some amazing things, but sometimes, just about the time they're ready to give up, or nothing is making sense. It's like, I can't remember which one of you said it, the story. Something like that will happen, So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right, Chad. You can't, I teach people very little. I just try to set them up for the experience you're talking about. But you've got to find it on your own. People can point you in the right direction, but you've got to do what we've done, in all of our different ways. I didn't go in the woods for 4 months. That's kind of cool, actually. I wish I could tell that story, but I can't. But it's everybody gets there a different way, and you can't have them experience it the same way you did because it won't be genuine. And the whole process has to be genuine. You're right. You don't get a degree. You don't read these books, do these tests. It's not how it works. It's all just when you get there. And then that's kind of how it works.
So how do you use your practices in today's modern world?
Oh, that's funny. I just do it when I need to do it is what it boils down to. I make myself, I make myself available. I have really modern things like a website and all this other stuff. When I do healing work, it's in the Sasiwas tradition. And I hold, that's the tradition I hold to right now. And I've been doing so for a long time. And so I respect that tradition. That's how I work. But I just, to me, it's just, you're there at the right time in the right place to meet with people who need you at that time. And I can't explain it any better than that. Spirit pushes people together, you and another person and make things happen. So I could be doing healing work, to try to empower them. And in our tradition, our belief is everybody has medicine. And it takes a while, a medicine, a gift from God or spirit, and it takes a while for you to get there. You have to pray on it. You have to think about it a lot. You have to, do certain actions to try to bring that medicine out. But the first thing you do is you heal yourself. I think Luther said that earlier. And that's what you have to do first. You heal yourself. And then before you even think about practicing, and doing things like that. But it's getting people to that point where they're healed and they start feeling that medicine. And I keep coming back to that. That's kind of what I do. But as far as my practices and things, that's basically how it works. I also do group work, for healings and things like that. I have a group that I work with, and we have a circle that I go to once a month. We do it in that as well. And so there's different places to do it. I do teach some classes at the local New Age shop. Just to give people an idea. It's not like you're going to walk out a shaman. That's ridiculous. But just to give them a taste of it. This is what some of the traditions do, and just to get people talking about and helping people develop their psychic abilities and whatever they need to do to light that lamp, to get that fire burning inside them. So that's what I use my shamanic works for, is to my practice. That's what I do, is to do that. So it just comes out when it needs to.
Yeah, I love that. I like what you said there about, lighting that fire. It's essentially I have a place that people visit, regularly. Obviously not right now. We're in June of 2020. It's kind of not exactly the time of people have been coming to my house, but up until the lockdown, it's a fairly regular situation. If I'm not traveling at events, then I have people that come here for divination and then some sort of spiritual work. And always I apply that the same way, is to help not only, if somebody feels like there's something binding them or whatever it is, the condition may be, we divine it and see if it's true. But either way, it's about opening their roads for them and giving them the formula or suggestions for them to go out and be self-sustaining. I don't teach a lot of people personally, like one-on-one. I have very select because I'm just a little busy of running the way that I do my practices. But it's about helping people achieve their roads to get to their destinies, their fates, and if those fates happen to be that they will in some point also become workers or illuminate or help feed and elevate certain spiritual forces or energies, and then that's wonderful. But and sometimes they are actually spiritual workers that come as well. So it's mostly for me again, and that's my whole paradigm with the Underground Railroad spirit world that I work with, is it's about helping people persevere and get to the next stage of their journey. And if you can help, wash them up and heal them up a little bit to get to the next place, then I guess that's great. That's essentially really what I do. At the end of the day, too, because of the amount of presentations I do, I'm always sort of holding a flag for certain traditions that, I'm using my privilege, using my platform to be able to protect. And that's going to be end up being American, North American root work, conjure, and some of the temples I belong to. And that's essentially what I do.
Yeah, and for me, it's so similar to both of those, but different. Energetically, it's so similar all across the board. And, I try to spend as much time in nature as I can. And that's how I get back to it, because that's how I grew up. That's how I associate this with my grandfather and the traditions, is being out. And, every night I try to give thanks at sunset, and people that need help, I make sure I post those photos, so they know that I'm still thinking about them, and I'm out working with the plants. And, my job, I kind of help talk to people, I guess, all the time, because my store is a medical physical new age store. And when people come in, sometimes they need some quick advice. So you try to help as you can. And I guess one of the big things is authenticity, just practice what you preach. You can't tell people to go around and lead a good life, or, do yoga so many times a day, or whatever it is, if you're not doing it yourself. And, I think with the way that I practice, it's so nature based. It's just almost second nature, I guess. It's almost hard for me to answer the question, because I kind of just do it, you know? And I think we all do. It sounds like it's ingrained in our daily life, you know, without even really thinking about it at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, you just made me realize that I think at times we have to be hyper, you know, more sensitive, or at least more knowledgeable to some degree, at least on a multi-level of different traditions. Because if you have a store like you say, then the amount of people from different paths that come in for help, you know, it's staggering sometimes. So in this modern era world, we have people coming in for spiritual advice or seeking something really quickly, like you said, that they're coming at it from so many different traditions and so many different lines and practices that, you know, it can be sometimes it can be overwhelming. And I think in the modern era, if anything else, we probably incur more people looking for spiritual help than the average shaman attending to his actual indigenous tribe. You know, it's
absolutely.
It's kind of funny because the modern world is so filled with people with so many, you know, sicknesses and issues that they need help with. It's really remarkable.
Sometimes I think spirit is like, okay, I'm going to make more of you guys because we need you out in the world. And we all have kind of on different paths, but it's all, you know, basically it's all from the same heart. And so, like, I think that's kind of it. Is like there's so many people out there that are just yearning for some type of meaning, spiritual meaning in their life, and the traditional religion doesn't do it for them. And so I think more people hear it, and then people, you know, and spirit says, okay, we need more recruits, and so I'm going to let you all folks, you know, you guys can do your thing, and they get you, you know, they suck you in, and they turn you loose. And so I think that's part of it. I think we're here to fill a need. As you look out, you know, watch the news for 5 minutes a day. Shoot, I mean, you know, you need people who are gonna, you know, not preach, but, you know, talk about being patient and being loving other people and having empathy and that type of thing. And it's kind of weird, but I think that's kind of how it works.
I'm guessing we're kind of like relatively near all the same age group, and so we all clearly will remember then pre-internet and just how slower time did go. And I think people had more patience when they entered into the spiritual world. They were prepared to dedicate a year or two towards certain formula. And now that is the one thing that I've noticed, is that there's a very short attention span. People want an instant fix, and if they don't get it from you, they're going to go to the other worker who's going to offer them exactly what they want to hear. The level of patience right now, I just wish certain people would devote a little bit more time towards a process for a little while, because none of us got to where we are because we rushed through it. We're all from an age where time was slower, and that's the hardest part right now, is a generation of people that are on the very quick response. They want the quick answer, and they want, you know, social media style quickness to certain things, and that's not really very realistic, unfortunately.
No. Sometimes you're just planting seeds.
There's just so many different places to get information now, like between YouTube and Facebook. I mean, you can type in, you know, what is a shaman, or how do I become a shaman, or, you know, how do I become a witch doctor? And there's probably a bunch of 2-minute and 5-minute videos where they broke it down and they say these are all the steps. And I think things like that are really confusing a lot of people, but at the same time, I think it's good because the information does get out there and it does pique a lot of interest, and then people really do start to study, and then maybe some of the people that weren't that into it, you know, they'll kind of fall off the radar because they do realize it doesn't matter what path you're on. If you're going to be successful in it, you have to dive in head first or something. You know, you need to at least devote more than 2 minutes to a YouTube clip to try to figure out how to do anything that's worth doing.
Yeah. It's really cool talking with you guys. I mean, and Casey, it's just, I don't get these conversations very often. I don't have a lot of, where I live close to St. Louis, Missouri. I live in Illinois, right across the river. There's not a whole lot of folks to converse with. And so this is really a treat for me. You guys, really appreciate listening to you.
Same.
Well, I'm happy that I could facilitate all this. How are shamanic practices and your own practices perceived by today's society?
Depends on who you talk to. I don't hide it very much. You know, because Casey's met me before. all kinds of tattoos on my arms with coyotes and hawks and thunderbirds and all that stuff. And it was weird when I first started doing this. I didn't live. I'm living now where I grew up. I was living in a different place when most of this stuff was happening when I first got initiated and everything. And I came back, I was a different person. I had to redo I thought I had to be all solemn and, and temperate and all that sort of thing. And was trying to be somebody I wasn't. And so I had to kind of, integrate myself with that new part of me, and which is, a very strong part of me. So I had to, became myself again with this added spirituality onto it. But it was kind of goofy there for a while because people were just didn't want to hear about it. And this is back in the, late 90s, early 2000s. And so it was difficult. I mean, some people love it. They hear about it and they say, oh my gosh. And, one of my job is I'm an advocate for people who live in nursing homes, and people will recognize me from, oh my God, I saw you at this event, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's really cool, because usually it's like, other people look like, you do what? But, yeah, it's, I used to be kind of, not embarrassed, but kind of, oh my gosh, and I don't care anymore. I was like, yeah, this is what I do, and this is the path I follow, and if you like it, cool, if not cool. But yeah, it's always kind of a mixed bag as far as how people react to it.
Yeah, and it's a few different ways for me. So with the Dragon Ritual Drummers, we've been around for a long time, so we've been really fortunate. We've been flown around the whole continent, played at really amazing pagan events and conjure events and so on and so forth. So we're usually welcomed, a lot, and because we provide a concert and fun, and we promote the drum and unity at a show and get everyone to dance. Sometimes though, in amongst that, now it's become sort of like regular, but about 13 or 14 years ago, when after being really immersed in the pagan community, because our band has been around for so long, it's kind of crazy. But once we started to promote and share elements of American voodoo and root work, that was not overtly welcomed in the pagan community very early on. And so, that was different, and there was a lot of people that weren't too comfortable with it. And so, again, I was just helping, because the temples and the people that I work with that are people of color, it was just like, well, if they're going to listen to a white person, then, well, this is how it has to be. But then, after a while, then, as the current culture has changed, once some people got wind of my title as Witchdoctor, they think it means something nefarious, or that I'm appropriating it or something like this. And this is people in the spiritual community. So it really is just like, it was just said there. It really depends on who you ask and how you're, who's analyzing your work. But, that's, as perception. I'm lucky. I'm sort of insular, mostly just spend my time amongst the spiritual community. So, but every once in a while, yeah, there's still people that have a question as to why I'm in voodoo as a white person, and or why do I identify as a witch doctor amongst witches, So that's really the only thing that requires me kind of having to pull out the notes and be like, oh, well, here's the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same experience here. I mean, like I said, I don't really say that I'm a shaman. I say I'm a traditional healer. Like, that's what I kind of put out there. And people ask, like, what is traditional healer? A lot of people kind of already know, like which direction things may be going, and it'll spark curiosity, or else other people, they just back right away. And then when you explain to them, I'm a Saminoidi, and they're like, well, what is that? Well, the easiest definition is to come out with the term a shaman. And really, it's much more than that. Like, I can't remember who it was that was talking about the Siberian shaman. Well, the Siberian shaman and the Saminoidi, they were the same group from Sapmi years and years ago. And then, as everybody kind of progressed, like, down through that area, it's kind of the same background, but they went towards Siberia, and they headed towards the Noides, and the Samis, they headed towards Scandinavia, and, so that term is kind of out there, but it's hard to say what it is. And the perception, I don't know. I've had some pretty crazy reactions. I actually had a student, and I was just teaching them Reiki 1. And I won't get into any names or anything, but, they were fairly religious. I told them what it was all about, and how everything worked. But at the end, when they just saw a little bit of how to work with energy just in Reiki 1, I got pretty much attacked by them afterwards, a few weeks after. And it was the Russian Orthodox Church. And they came in and rebuked me. And I've had some crazy threats and some crazy things happen over the years. And I don't know, I guess it's every end of the spectrum. But for the most part, most people I think are just curious and accepting. And a lot of people are looking for something bigger than what they know. So I think there is more awareness of things like this. And I think there is better acceptance than certain incidents that will come up. And definitely, it seems probably for all of us, when we have a bad experience like that in perception, it's usually a pretty bad one. But for the most part, most people seem to be pretty accepting or even keeled about things.
I was working in Chicago one time and at a New Age shop, a metaphysical store, and I was doing readings that day, and some guys from the Bible college came in nearby, and it wasn't too crazy, but they were, a couple of them are pretty nasty. I'm like, whatever. It's like, we all walk our own paths. You think of the Holy Spirit when you think of energy, and a couple of them are pretty rude and stuff, which is, I don't get ruffled very quickly. And so it's like, okay, well, cool. We all walk our own paths. And it was kind of cool. One of them called me later on, a couple of days later, and apologized and said, you were very genuine and we shouldn't have done that. And so, so sometimes people learn through those types of disagreements and whatnot that, they reflect on it and say, well, maybe, maybe it's not our way, but it's not a bad way. And so sometimes the lessons get taught. You got to take a bunch of crap sometimes in the meantime. But if it, it's all okay then. To me, if it's all okay, if something like that comes out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have a situation where they seemed to see the light afterwards. In fact, I had something happen to me last summer that was just ridiculous. And, I mean, if you want to talk about how we're perceived on the wrong side, we may as well go right down the rabbit hole. And last summer, I was actually held at knife point for over an hour and a half and threatened to be crucified. So,
Jesus.
I guess there are some people that will take it to the extreme, and it involved an entire police investigation, and it was pretty scary. But yeah, I guess you have every end of the spectrum. I mean, you will have those people that are just hell-bent on turning a situation completely wrong. And then you have other people that just either don't care or they're accepting of you.
Yes, unfortunately, people fear what they don't understand and what they don't know. And instead of educate themselves, because of ego and pride, they just further themselves into their way of thinking because that's where it's comfortable. And unfortunately, that will come out as different things like violence or, just ignorance in general. So, I'm sorry.
The unknown is very scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's also it's a scary time right now, to be honest, with again the advent of the amount of information age, as well as the sort of emboldened, very radical Christian extreme view that is running amok through the continent. It's not like it was always the case, so they're definitely getting into our sphere a bit more than normal, which is definitely why I think it's good to be protected in some ways, spiritually, because you never know when you're going to occur when a situation like you just described, that's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes. So my next question, which is my toughest one, but it's one that I think definitely needs to be talked about. So there's a term called plastic shamanism or plastic shaman, and it refers to somebody who claims to be a shaman and is lack thereof. They're pretty much pretending, and which can cause a lot of damage and things like that. So I know the natives have put this term to somebody who does that, is plastic shamanism. So, but how can someone like me notice the difference between somebody who is a shaman and who is a plastic shaman? But I want to extend this out to other medicines and practices too, because it's not just with shamanism, it's pretty much with all spiritual practices. So how can somebody like me know the difference?
Yeah, to me, you can kind of tell why people do what they do. I think I mentioned earlier there was about charging $1,000. It was $400 to do a Nipi ceremony, sweat lodge. If they're charging a bunch of money to do things that if you go to a traditional person would do it for free or just for an offering, you always give an offering when you do these things. If they're trying to make a boatload of cash out of it, I don't charge for doing healing work. I don't charge to go and cleanse somebody's house. If it's spiritual work, I don't charge for it. If I'm in a psychic fair and I'm doing readings, I charge for that. If I'm doing a paranormal event and with charge admission, I get a little bit. I don't make much money from doing this stuff, but I mean mostly so I get my gas money and I can travel, go to cool places. Which is a big part of the fun there is go out and meet new people and stuff. But yeah, and they're trying to sell you something too. I don't sell anybody nothing. I just tell you, okay, you can come hang with me, and if you can get something out of it, I can help you do this, this, and this. And if you want to give me a couple bucks, you can. Otherwise, don't worry about it. But if they say, well, I've got this program for you. It costs you $500, and you'll get the certificate. I would say that would be a warning to me. That would, it all depends on the intent of the person. And how they're sincere. They're really sincere about you, or they want to just put on a slick show that looks good and make a lot of money. That's how I would delineate it. It's where that person's heart is, and you can tell pretty quick, I think. Oh yeah. So that's what I mean. And believe me, being white, mostly white, I've been accused of such things, but I mean, and that you're going to anyway. And because you're not totally native, and that's fine. I mean, I can't argue with what I am. I didn't ask for it, and I don't charge for most of the things I do. And so you can call me what you want, and we can talk about when we both get to the spirit world. Is kind of how I look at it. But I just do this to help other people. I don't. I work a regular job and to make money, and so I'm blessed, and I'm able to help other people by doing my work that way.
Yeah, the monetization, that usually is a good giveaway when someone's way overcharging for certain things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care charging a little bit, but yeah.
Absolutely. But and luckily, so my observation is, luckily the neo-pagan community, at least, so let's call it that, luckily money's not usually ever required to enter into initiation if you're going to go the traditional witchcraft route. Mm-hmm. And, you pay money to go to the conferences, but it's the new age, what we call the new age, which is, again, very generalization, but I function amongst it sometimes, and that's where you'll incur these people that charge exorbitant amounts of money for things that we would be doing for next to nothing, or for half that price or something, and then you also can tell that person is not supposed to be doing that ceremony right now. Like, that is crazy. There's the ability, but there's always one, born, as they say, so it's tough. To come to you wish people wouldn't be so easily taken, but where it is unfortunately also very prevalent, though, is in what we call the African traditional religions, the Santeria, Voodoo, Palomambe world. Unfortunately, that place is filled with financial predators, and I see it all the time. A lot of people that are considered contemporaries that we know who each other are. I know they're doing like just outrageous things for money, and it's just not, and once in a while people will call it out. But unfortunately, when there's a spiritual tradition that has money attached to it, and that's definitely, unfortunately, the problem with African traditional religions. It's been monetized very early. It's just filled with now people trying to capitalize on that. And so anybody who's, trying to really charge money too much, or has that sort of, level of, a concubine, if they have that following them around, or you can see that they're just like, there's one part of you that's like, geez, wow, how's this guy getting away with this? And the other part, you feel wanting to tell people like, hey, take it easy. But thankfully I don't really see a lot of those people anymore, too often. Just in the African traditional religious world, there's some people that definitely fiend who they are and well overprice what they're doing. It's kind of outrageous, actually.
Yeah. I'm too stupid to have a concubine. I mean, I was teaching a young lady one time, this was a few years ago, and it's like, and she's a good kid and everything, and she was a pretty decent student. But it's like, one day my wife said to me, she goes, that girl likes you. I said, what? She's like 15, 20 years younger than I was, 15 years younger than I was. I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, no. And I'm like, oh, Christ, she's right. Yes. But I mean, and she moved I didn't have to really deal with that. So I was like, I was completely oblivious to it. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm safe. I am, I'm married and I take that very seriously. And so, that's never something I've even thought about. I know people do it. They do it for that. I've seen those guys. So.
Yeah, I guess when, it comes to the whole term plastic shaman too, I think even that is so controversial, because if you look at any religion, we'll take a major religion like Christianity, for example, and, how Christian is that person? What is the gauge for that person to be the most Christian? What is the bar? Do they have to go all the way up and become the Pope before they are really Christian? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of leeway in that whole thing, and it's tricky. And I think one of the biggest things is when you meet somebody, right off the bat if there's something about them. If you meet somebody that knows, say, the unknown, you'll feel it as soon as you see them. When you actually sit down with them, I guess they dissolve the perceptions of reality. Any problems that you might have, there is a real attainable solution. The solution isn't like 19 levels of daily practice to try to attain some level of enlightenment. The solution is usually simple and it can be attained now, for the most part. And I don't know, I guess you wouldn't go to a doctor to fix a problem and then have them tell you need to go to medical school before you're fixed.
True.
So, it's kind of all over the board.
Yeah. I mean, people have to take responsibility for their healing and for their, spiritual progress. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, it does open up. It does actually really open up an ability. Like, it's safe to say we probably all would are comfortable with being able to. I've never used the term, but I heard it, and we might be able to be easily identify one as particular somebody up to no good. But yeah, it's a term that could be used against any of us, to be honest. From somebody that was just like, some anthropologist or somebody would be like, nah, I don't believe these guys. They're plastic shaman. It's very easy to chuck that label around at anybody, really, and police it a little bit. It's true.
Yeah. Well, you
wouldn't really know unless you sit with them. If you sit with them in ceremony, you will know.
Yep.
And I think that's the only way to judge it. I mean, you can look at anything. You can watch some videos, you can read some books. It's hard to tell. You can even, check out reviews or hear what other people say that are close to you that have visited that person. But you will never know unless you go sit with them in ceremony. And when you sit in ceremony, you will definitely know by the time that ceremony is done, whether that you just experienced was real or not.
Yeah,
and
so true.
Like they said too, I mean, if it's thousands of dollars for a ceremony, and there's a bunch of people that fly in from all over the world to check it out, I'm not saying it's not legit. It could be totally legit, and I haven't been to that one yet, but I'd love to. And there's a lot of big ceremonies that are like that, but you just don't know until you go sit with them.
Yeah, right. I agree. Ceremony will reveal many things.
So true.
Okay. I kind of like to use the term plastic shaman as just kind of like a moral compass, if you will. So I keep that word in the back of my mind, and then it reminds me to always be authentic. Don't say something because it sounds really cool. Be authentic. If this feels right, this is what you're doing. If it doesn't feel right, it's okay. Just let it be, you know. You don't have to claim that you know this just because it is pretty or it looks cool. And so I kind of use it as, not that I consider myself a shaman. I just use this as kind of a moral compass for my own practice. Mm-hmm. So that's what it's kind of become for me. And one of the biggest things that I've been working with it is really, really trying to fine tune what my practice is and what I am versus what a shaman is. And that way I'm walking a very fine line with it. Because with like fire ceremonies, like a lot of people don't know that when you burn, you know, any sage or any smudge stick, or sweetgrass, that is a form of fire ceremony. And a lot of people don't look at it that way. And a lot of people do just kind of use it, you know, whenever, willy-nilly. And there needs to be a little bit more honor and respect to it than just lighting it up.
Yeah. Always give it to spirits.
I agree. I think at the same time, though, I think some of the awareness where, even if it is just somebody that knows, hey, there's bad energy, you know, my friend said I need to go get some sage and use it. And if they use that, I think it's kind of good, though, because it does open the doors and it does help awareness. You know, it helps people learn things like what you just said, Kadra. They'll become aware of that, and then maybe that is the thing that actually sets them off on their journey. Like, they had a friend that told them the sage, they did it. Oh, wait, I did it wrong. There's more to this. And they start looking into it and how to really respect it. And they get interested in things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely can open a lot of doors. And it's one of those things too. This is getting a slightly bit off topic, but it's one of those things, like, we're seeing a lot of the crystals and, you know, a lot of trendy things like that are coming out, and people are buying them by the dozens. And at one point, it's like it's going to lose a little bit of its value because of the sacredness not being there. But on the other hand, it's like, I feel so wonderful, you know, that a lot of people are actually reaching out for these different modalities of healing, because we're finally recognizing that we need it. And I think that is a wonderful thing. With that, definitely I would very much recommend that people do the research, do the homework on what they're using and why they're using it. And then even with their own religious, you know, backgrounds or beliefs, put that sacredness into it.
Yeah, poor crystals. They've also been so maligned with being relegated to something comical, when yet, you know, hey, that's a very profound type of magic. It's very strong. And again, when you see some of the Incan shaman, when they build those grids, you know, with the crystals they use, it's so powerful. It's so unique. You know, it's too bad. A lot of times people are surprised when they come to my place and see my front table where we do readings, just how many of them are on there, and how often I recommend that they carry certain things on them or put certain things in their house crystal wise, because it's such a unique, you know, that energy and that magic that comes out of some of them is amazing. And it's just too bad that it's so relegated these days to, you know, oh, crystals, when it's like, yeah, no, crystals, they work. You know, some of them are very powerful.
I'm a little biased on this. I don't know how much you other guys know about me, but, you know, when I was a kid, we lived on a gravel road, and I picked up the rocks that were cool and I put them on a table. I don't know why the heck I did it. I really liked them. And I sold those to some neighbors that were nice enough to stop and check out my rocks while everybody else had Kool-Aid stands, you know? And I've always been drawn to the energy of them. And yeah, I think, you know, my store has a lot of crystals, a lot of books, a lot of things like that. And it actually started out as just a healing center. And then I wanted to have supplies for other healers, and it just kind of grew. And I've always been drawn to things like that. And there really is a lot of power to it. And there's a lot of people that like them just because they look pretty. They catch the light, you know, ooh, this one's got a rainbow. And then you really do have the energy buyers, and the energy people, they come in, they don't even know what they're looking for. and they're like, this is the one I need. And you won't see them for months, you know. And there's other people that'll collect them just to collect them because they are beautiful. And I mean, they are beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They always choose me. I mean, I'll walk by and like, oh, I got to have that. I remember that I saw a Wanda selenite one time. I keep it with me. It's in my medicine bag, which is actually a backpack. But, you know, it just calls to you. Like, I got to have that. I use it when I'm doing healing work and stuff. And, yeah, I mean, and I'm terrible about names and things like that. If I use one, I'll figure out what it does and stuff like that. There's just so many. I can't keep up with them all. But they start talking to you and you're like, okay, you know, I'm with you, you know, and I'll get you and figure out what you're about and I'll use you. But yeah, they do choose you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so true.
Oh yeah.
That's absolutely true. I'm right now sitting in front of a vase it's filled up with hagstones, and it's just from walking along, and I'll find 20 while walking along, and it's just they're not pretty. They come in all different sizes and shapes and colors, but they're just a rock with a hole all the way through. But I'm honored to be able to work with them, and because they're kind of a tricky one to work with, but I'm very honored to have them and have them call to me. So
don't get spiritual workers talking about rock crystals.
Yeah, Kay, the first time I met you, I think we had quite the conversation about hagstones too. So they're definitely powerful, and it takes, you know, people don't usually just go out and start finding them either. It's one of those energy things where if you go out with somebody that collects them, or they tell you how, or they show you a hagstone or give you one, that's usually when people start collecting them. You know, they hear a hagstone call. And Kay, I'm sure you've walked along that beach and you knew there was a hagstone, and as soon as you looked down, there was one right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Spirit also tells me, hey, you need to take 3 steps here and then look down. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and so I'm very passionate and connected to Spirit, and so I talk to them, and they talk to me, and they tell me what it is that I need or what's in the area that I can use. And so I take that to heart, and I always listen. If I don't listen, I usually get some sort of boo-boo.
Yes.
So I always try to make sure I listen. And I'll chuckle and I'll say, well, you were right. You know, I'll give them the acknowledgement that I should have listened. All right. Well, my last question for you guys. What advice would you give to somebody wanting to learn shamanism, shamanic practices, or your practices?
Oh, you know, I make sure that they're very sure about it. You know, I get that a lot, and then they kind of get into it for a little while, and then it's not for them. I just try to let them be open, you know, and you can use it as a teaching experience. Say, okay, well, I can show you. You know, I have some very generic things I give people right off the bat. If they can do those, and that they, you know, I am not one to. I don't take apprentices and things like that. I do teach, and I just try to get people kind of shaped up, and then, you know, get them to their next teacher. But yeah, I would, you know, say, okay, there's something's calling them, and they see what I'm doing, or maybe they like me, or they get something, you know, they get a message, or they're not sure why they got that they need to talk to me or something like that. And so I would, you know, surely let's talk about it. Let's see what's going on, and just try to get them on the right course, give them some things to do first to kind of get them, you know, involved in some things and to learn some things, and then see where they want to go from there. You know, sometimes you set off on one path thinking you want to be one thing, and it's the right thing to do, but the Spirit opens a different door, and you got, you know, oh, I got to go this way now. And so if it's going to help somebody get on the road to who they're supposed to be, whether it's to be, you know, be a shamanic practitioner or something like that, that's fine. It's just, let's get them going where they need to go. But yeah, but I won't be just like you. No, I would say, no, you can't do that, because nobody can be like each other. We're all unique. We all have to follow our different paths. And so that's another reason I don't take appearances and stuff like that very often. So it's just, you know, let's get you going and let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's very personal. That's the one thing. When I do teach people, and I have a few, it's just that they have to pretty much be living around me. They're usually members of the Dragon Ritual Drummers or some of the temples that belong to it, that are within proximity, because it comes down to that personal patience and pace that is, again, it's kind of like a martial art sometimes to say that to people, to take it to learn the energy a little bit, down to, for example, I'm a collector of hagstones too. I live right on the lake, Ontario. So those are the little things that if you have the person that you're sort of trying to help guide along, they spend personal time with you when you go out into the woods, when you go along the shores. So therefore they're there when you find bones of an animal or you find a hagstone. That's what you're hoping, or when you're out and a certain storm comes through, that, you want them to be, so it's very personal. Like that's how I've always been taught from people. I've been fortunate. I've devoted many years to many people that have been the folks that, were my mentors, and that required a lot of spending time at their home, traveling with them, watching how ceremonies are done. And then at some point, just remembering that you may be asked to help facilitate that part. So you better remember what you watch, right? So it's always, to me, a very personal thing. And that's just, again, one of the things I miss about, or I just sort of lament a little bit. And it's not a big deal, but just this modern era, there's definitely people that are less prone to that level of a pace of patience to really dial yourself down into the sort of speed that is necessary to find a hagstone, to find the right animal skull you'd like to find in the woods, to find certain feathers and to find certain plants when you're out hiking. These are the things that, we're being guided through because we're tuned to it. And so, the way I teach is mostly, it's hands-on. It's hands-on. You spend time with me. Eventually almost all the guys in my troop know that at some point they're going to be asked to speak in the ceremony we're doing at the event we're at, or they all know their part we all sort of play that sort of a team. I've always worked really well in a tribe setting, like a group of people working as a unified group. That seems to work for me, and that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, and it is very personal. I mean, we talked about this a little bit. Like, you can't just go get a book and learn how to do it. And, it's hard to teach somebody that's older, how to find Amanita, which is my plant teacher. That's what I work with the most. When I was little, I was taught when you walk through the woods, you call for it. Little kids, they have that innocence. If you tell them, hey, if you say Amanita, this mushroom will appear. And they did. And if I walked through the woods and I tried to get them, I'd even have trouble later on. But my two daughters, when they were like 6 and 10, we would go in the woods and they'd be walking around, Amanita, Amanita, and they would show up all over the place. They know that things are possible. And it's hard to really kind of teach that unless you do have, I guess, an apprentice or something. It's hard to find ways to explain a lot of the things that we have. And really, a lot of times when things like this happen to people and they do become aware, they've gone through some experience in their life that was, literally life-changing. We hear about it all the time with near-death experiences, or something traumatic happened, or you hear about somebody that was in solitary confinement for years and, they basically came out like an enlightened Buddha, and they were a hardened criminal when they got thrown in that cell. So some of this stuff is really hard to teach, and it's really hard to teach even hands-on. It's more of a feeling than a teaching, and I guess if somebody was interested, they'd have to meet, my teacher, which is Amanita, and my grandfather, which unfortunately is not around anymore. So I guess somebody would have to go sit in ceremony first and realize what they're getting into. And this is no joke. There is no turning back. I mean, you can prepare for years doing certain rituals and techniques every single day to try to gain that enlightenment. But if you work with a plant medicine, there is no barrier. You're going to go there right now. It's no joke. You're going to learn something today, So that's probably one of the hardest questions, is how do you teach this?
Yeah.
I do like as well what I found over the years is, and I'm grateful that, people that taught me had the same philosophy, is when you drop some ego, it's amazing if you're in the position to be the teacher, how much you learn from the person that actually, you're supposedly teaching. If you listen, they also have this inherent, because eventually by the time someone's chosen to work with you or to learn a little while, they probably have some pretty interesting energy and magic in their own right, the way they've always procured and found things. So that's also why it's so gratifying that as personal as it is because you're also going to learn something from that person. And that's a good way to encourage people, I think, is when you go, oh, I never thought about that. Much like most of this conversation, I've heard some of the things you guys are saying. I'm like, oh, yeah, I never really thought about that. And I've never thought about calling out to the mushroom in the woods. That's such a great idea. It's so simple. Of course.
It's wonderful.
It works too. I understand what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, there is a consciousness in the plants, and
Yes.
when you work with a plant as a medicine, especially something like Amanita, and for years it's been thrown around that it's toxic and it's a poison, and it's scared the death out of everybody. It makes people really nervous about it, and then when you offer it as, I guess, a form of healing and a teacher, and people get really scared because they've seen bad things about that. But it's like anything else. It's how things are prepared. If things are done ceremonially or if they're just done haphazardly and thrown around, it makes a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it really comes back to that. Know what your center is. Do your own homework before you try to work with a teacher, and then that way you're already that far into it. You know what the potential is for you to get into, and what your center is and what you're comfortable with. Because I think a lot of people, they start these journeys and then they they get caught up in one thing that doesn't set well with them. Instead of looking at the bigger picture of what they're learning, they get, stuck because something was worded this way, or, this was done this way and it didn't feel well. Well, it's okay that it doesn't feel well, but either acknowledge it and move forward, or acknowledge it and move on. And I think a lot of people, because of ego, it's something cool that they want to, that they're too stubborn to admit that. So
the ego is really tough. We could have conversations probably for quite some time just on the ego. But
I think so.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you guys so much for being on my show. I appreciate it, and I absolutely value every last bit that you guys have just talked to me about. It was really, really incredible to have a conversation with all three of you.
Incredible to
my
be a part
pleasure.
of it.
Yeah, it was very gratifying to listen and get to meet you guys. And thank you so much for having me on, Casey. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. So,
Thank you so much.
Okay. Good night.
Bye.
Яичко.
Thank you for joining my circle tonight. It was a pleasure to discuss this spooky topic with you. And a thank you to all my listeners for tuning in. And as always, dreadful dreams. Remember, my darlings, to always be kind to those around you, including our friends with claws, fangs, and fur.